get that started. You took my one job. I
hope I don't get in trouble for moving things on stage. How's that?
Of course she is. What's doing? Caitlin.
And it's fine, like, if people come in and out.
Yeah.
No problem. So give me the sign when you're ready.
Okay, I guess we'll go ahead.
I'm guessing you can use the microphone.
Oh, cool.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second Women in Music event. The Women in Music program's main purpose is to empower young women to be involved in the music world and provide support in a male-dominated profession. Through these events, we hope to help broaden a young woman's knowledge of women in the music industry. Tonight we'll hear from the CEO and President of the St. Louis Symphony, Hélène. Since 1996, Marie has been involved with the League of American Orchestra, served as Executive Director and CEO of the Handel and Haydn Society in Boston, Chief of Staff, Project Manager, and Orchestra Manager for the Philadelphia Orchestra, Orchestra Manager for the Cleveland Orchestra, and the President and CEO of the Canton, Ohio Symphony Orchestra. In 2015, she became the President and CEO of the St. Louis Symphony. And as head of the St. Louis Symphony, she has increased attendance and ticket sales and led the symphony into a period of great momentum and growth. I'm especially excited about some of the changes she's made, such as her thing with like the soundtrack, the musical soundtracks. I love those. Yeah. And Marie has been an inspiration to many, not only in the music world, but also in management and business. She's taken a male-dominated career and made her mark. The lack of inclusion and underrepresentation that Marie and many others have faced is why I created the program in hopes to help young women find their voice and find role models such as Hélène. Just before we begin, please remember a few reminders. Please keep your mask on in proper fashion at all times for your safety of you and for others. Please also silence your cell phone as we want to minimize the number of distractions. At the end of the speech, there will be a time for Q&A. Please do not hesitate to ask questions. We want you to be as involved as possible. Also, when the event is over, we ask you to please fill out a survey on the website, in the brochure, or on the description box of the live stream. The survey will help us cater to future events to help you and our programs thrive. Please take the time out to fill out this short survey. Lastly, I want to thank you all so much for coming to this event, both in person and virtually. I cannot put into words how grateful I am. Now it's my pleasure to welcome Hélène.
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I was very impressed when Mackenzie reached out to me. She was very clear about what she was looking for, and I thought, as a younger woman, like many of you, raised in a Catholic private school in Montreal ages ago, long before most of you were born, I really value the kind of education and the kind of opportunities that these schools give me. So I thought it was my turn to give back and also give you a sense of, how my own career has evolved, but what is today's environment when it comes to arts management and leadership? I know some of you might aspire to a career in arts management. Some of you don't know. Some of you are parents or faculty. So what I share this evening with you is my own reflection and experience. It's not the only way to get to a career in arts management, but I'm interested to hear from all of you, whether you're a student, faculty, or parents, your thoughts about this, your questions, and if you're a student, if you have questions or anxieties or about the future. I have mentored many young high schoolers and college students and students at the undergrad and master's degree, and I really enjoyed that. So I will share my contacts with Mackenzie after the lecture tonight, so feel free to reach out to me. So first, show of hands, students, yeah, great, parents, and faculty. I know we met, yes, nice to meet you. So essentially what I'm looking for this evening is to have a conversation with you. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about where I come from, what led me to the career I'm having today, and share with you a few perspectives when it comes to leadership, but also as an employer, what I'm looking for. And that applies to all of you, whether you're a student or a parent. employment sector, there's a certain way to go about certain jobs, but also the world is your oyster. And right now, especially right now, in the almost post-pandemic world, we are lacking qualified employees, and hiring is challenging. And I think us as women, and I'm sorry gentlemen, but I'm just going to say us women, there's research that shows that women often don't apply to a job because they don't think they are qualified. While most men, for the same job, when they are underqualified or less qualified than women, apply. So ladies, go for it. You will never be accused of overestimating your talent or your capacity, your capabilities, or your skill set. It's actually quite the opposite. So I'm encouraging you to really don't be shy about, and you know, the worst that could happen is you go through an interview process and you say, you know what, I'm not qualified for this job, this is not for me. But again, I just read a study this week, and it shows that women underestimate their abilities and often miss career opportunities because they don't think they have the whole thing. A guy is going to see a job and say, well, I kind of do that, so I'm going to go for it. But the woman looks at a whole job description and says, well, I'm not going to apply because there's one or two things I don't know how to do. So keep that in mind as we go forward. So tonight, what I wanted to do is, first of all, meet with you and then talk to you about where I'm from and what led me to my job today and what I do. You know, I have this completely insane role and job. And I'll tell you what a day looks like, but it's quite interesting. It's a fascinating world. And the qualities I have found in leadership over the years, whether you hold a leadership position or not. And then also want to share with you what I wish I knew when I was 16, because it took me a really, really long time to go to people in my life for advice or for help. So my hope tonight is if I give you just a little bit of encouragement to never be afraid to ask for help or guidance, just please use that opportunity. And what you need to know if you want to work in the arts. So show of hands, how many, some of you obviously work in arts education, but how many among yourself want to pursue or thinking of pursuing a career in arts management? Anyone? Yeah, kind of. So, theater, music, performance, good, okay. And you know, the criteria don't really matter. It doesn't change, whether it's theater or visual arts or music. There are some differences. If you're pursuing a career in museum management, it's going to be hard to make a switch to music management later. And if you are starting in theater, the switch to music is less difficult, but it's amazing how the sectors in arts are very shallow. So it's just something to keep in mind. So I will tell you where I'm from. I was born, my mother is Canadian, my father is Belgian. And my mother's family, it's mostly her brother, is a leader in music, in early music in North America. So I grew up, like he's a very famous organist, harpsichordist, and revived the entire early music movement in North America. So I grew up in a family, my mother was a pianist, not a professional, she was mostly a stay-at-home mother. But I grew up in an environment that was very much artistic. My mother played the piano, she played the harpsichord, all of us dabbled into music. There was art, literature, but everything was available to us and there was never any pressure. Like I was never pressured to learn the piano, the violin, which I learned and hated. I hated the violin with passion. And I learned the viola da gamba, which is the instrument on the right, and I still play it today, but it was very unusual and I was very gifted and very advanced. And as a teenager, I was featured in many productions in Montreal. So by age 17 or 18, I had had almost 5-6 years of professional experience as a musician in Montreal while going to high school. Yes?
What was it called?
The instrument? Viola da gamba. So like a viola, there's a space, D-A, space G-A-M-B-A. And you can Google it now if you want to see pictures. You know the instrument, you will recognize it, but when I say it, it doesn't sound familiar. So Bach wrote many cantatas. Bach wrote, how many cantatas did he write? I don't even remember, 200? The gamba is the bass continuo, is the bass instrument in most of his cantatas. It was used by Handel, and a lot of Baroque composers wrote between 1500 and 1750. Handel wrote for it. Haydn and Mozart did not write for the instrument. At that time, the cello took over because it was an instrument that had a deeper sound and that had a more robust presence. And that's when the symphony orchestra evolved. So basically, the French Revolution, 1789, 1790, is the end of the era that composers wrote music for the instrument. So when I play this instrument, there's a lot of British, English music, Italian, Spanish, French, German, lots of German. But it ranges roughly from 1500 to about 1790. Today, there are composers who write for the instrument, but it's rather rare. And there was a revival of early music in the mid 1950s, and since there's been a lot of fabulous players who were recorded and really published all the material that was found, and some instruments. My instrument is a copy of a French instrument that was made in 1690. But today in the world, there are several gambists who have professional careers, and they have original instruments that date back to the 16th and 17th century. So it's a beautiful instrument, and it was designed to replicate the sound of the voice. So oftentimes when you see groups of gambists together, we call that consort. There's a lot of music written for 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 viola de gambas. And they get together and they play beautiful music in unison, and it's pretty fabulous. So I grew up doing this and also love dogs, and to this day I still love dogs. So this is me on the left and me on the right. But basically by the time I finished high school and was ready to go to college, I had other interests and I wanted to pursue a career as a journalist. And to spare you the story, I ended up in law school and graduated with high honors and started practicing tax law. So I practiced tax law for 7 years in Montreal, and I loved it. Is my microphone getting in the way? Lower it. Love tax law, had great partners, was taught by amazing mentors, all men. But after several years, realized I missed music, and that's why I started exploring a career in arts management, music management. And that's where I realized there was very few resources. I didn't know where to go. And one of my brothers is the associate principal cellist of the Cleveland Orchestra. And I asked his opinion, and he connected me to people in the US. In the meantime, I did a master's degree in arts administration, which, by the way, you don't need today to do a job in arts management. And then I moved to the US 25 years ago in August of '96. So I finished my master's degree, I left the law firm. My partners were shocked, and I moved to the US to do a fellowship in orchestra management, and I had amazing opportunities to work with several orchestras, the New York Phil, the Minnesota Orchestra, and I work in Boston, and then I got my first job as a chief of staff at the Philadelphia Orchestra. I was 28 years old, I was a trained tax attorney, and I had music as a background, so of course the management was thrilled. So I did a lot of contractual work, a lot of chief of staff job type. And this led me to work at the Cleveland Orchestra, and in Boston, and finally here in St. Louis. So I came to St. Louis in 2015, 6 years ago. The reason I share this with you is you never know where your career is going to take you, but there's not one way to go towards, to aspire to leadership or to work in music management. And when I say this, I can send it to Mackenzie, but 3 years ago, there was a very important study commissioned by, it's a headhunters firm, it's called, their name is not going to come back to me. Anyway, they're headhunters and they do a lot of research in the world of employment and leadership. They interviewed 37 female CEOs of some of the middle and large companies in the US. As you can suspect, there's not a lot of women who run companies like Pepsi or Amazon. So there's 37 of them that agreed to be interviewed. And the result of the survey was very telling. What I told you earlier about women underestimating their abilities was found in that research. But the second thing is, among all of the 37 women interviewed, only 12% of them knew from an early age that they wanted to be leaders, that they wanted to be CEOs, that this is what their career, was going to be. And all of those had no idea, and they never thought in the world that they would be CEO of a company. And it's over the years that they found the mentors and people who encouraged them or said, "You're pretty good at this. Have you ever thought of running for this job?" And most people who encouraged them over time were not just women. There were many men who encouraged these women to really break barriers and aspire to a role as a leader. So keep that in mind, because your best advisor and your best mentor, there's a lot of women who are very good at it, but there's a lot of men who are very good at it as well. And I've had great mentors, both female and men, and it's good to ask, because men and women communicate differently, and they also view leadership differently, and their experiences are very different. So I just want you to keep that in mind. This is the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra. I have right now close to 90 musicians. The vast majority are women. We were the first American orchestra in 2015 to find more women within their ranks than men. And we were the first orchestra to appoint women principals in positions that are not, that were not traditionally female-led. For example, principal trumpet, principal horn. We have several tuba players, several horn players, so mostly brass and woodwind. For a long time were only held by men, and now there's probably half and half, and some of my sections are mostly female. Strings, by nature, over the years were majority female, and like the harpist in the orchestra, I've never met a man harpist. It doesn't mean anything. She's a female, but harp was the first position in American orchestras where you found women in the 60s and 70s and 80s. I think it's a fairy tale part. With the harp, there's something really magical about the instrument. So that's the Symphony Orchestra. I was recruited in 2015, and I came from a smaller organization, but had worked with very large organizations before. So when the board hired me, they were taking the risk that I had not ran an organization with a budget of the magnitude of the St. Louis Symphony, which is $30 million a year. And we have now an endowment of $277 million. And I will say something to you. Is in leadership, size doesn't matter.
Just say, some of the interference, I'm not sure what's causing it. Do you want to use the handheld mic instead?
We can. Yeah. Okay. Let me do that. Could be my phone as well.
I don't think so.
Okay. I just thought it was me moving the bell. Let's put it here. And it's possible you may hear me. Can you hear me? If you don't mind, I can go without. I can go without. I mean,
Okay. Well, mic is this on?
is this better? Okay. That's a little better. Okay. So in leadership, size of organization doesn't matter. It's how you go about leading an organization, inspiring people, setting a vision. The size matters when it comes to managing a team and knowing how to delegate and empowering people and really giving them a sense of managing up. That's the toughest part, is that when you come from a small organization, there's fewer people doing a job. When you move to a very large organization, you have more resources. And the greatest adjustment I had to make was to be very clever about how to use resources. And that's true of any job, whether you're the boss or you're someone working in a department. To understand resources and to understand how to leverage resources, your own and that of others, it's a matter of efficiency, and that's very, very important. But it's true of any job, not just the CEO job. So, there you go. So what do I do every day? So essentially, I have a very large portfolio. The board hired me, so the board is my first portfolio. I support their recruitment. I manage their work, I set strategies with them, policies, and I ensure that every decision we make is in support of our mission, in service of the community. Fundraising is a very big part of my job. I have to raise $20 million every year, And I do this very successfully because I enjoy it. And philanthropy is not about money, it's about building relationships. So I spend a lot of time meeting people, taking people out, and nurturing relationships and understand what people are passionate about and what brings them to support the symphony. So that's a very big part of my job. Another big part of my job is working with this guy. So the guy that's sitting in the middle, Stéphane Denet, is our music director. So together we plan the artistic season. That's his primary job, but I sign off on everything and anything he plans, and programming is very broad. It's everything we do on the stage at Powell Hall, it's everything we do in the community, it's everything the orchestra plays, from classical concerts to movie music to concerts that are popular, anything, and also education programs. So I have a whole team that implements this. Another thing I do quite a bit is managing and recruiting staff and keeping them too, which is a big job, is keeping the morale of the organization really healthy and positive and really leading the organization. So a lot of communication, I'm the official spokesperson. Again, I have a team, so a lot of people help me do this job. And lastly, in terms of the team itself, we have currently about 60, 65 full-time staff. We have about 90 musicians, 350 symphony volunteers. So we have an association with volunteers and they help out with events and concerts. We have 100 students in our youth orchestra, so that are recruited from around the schools in the region. 100 members of our St. Louis Symphony Chorus, 120 chorus in the unison chorus, which is an African-American chorus performing music by African-American and Black composers, and about 70 ushers and bartenders. So altogether, the organization is about 700 or 800 people, and every year we employ about 1,000 people around. So a lot of HR issues, a ton of HR issues. If you want to be a boss or a manager or a CEO, I always tell people getting an MBA is a good idea, but if you really want to understand people, you're going to get a psychology degree. So if you don't like people, if you're not interested in psychology or understanding human beings, don't go into the field of management, because 80% of your time, oftentimes, you will be dealing with HR issues. It's a lot, it's constant, but it's normal. You have people. 70% of my budget are fixed costs that are salaries. So it says something about what makes the organization is people. People who make the music, artists, musicians, or people who support the music. Marketers, artistic planners, fundraisers, finance people, building people, and so on and so forth. So the management of the team is really, really, really important. And then lastly, I'm a labor negotiator. So because the orchestra and the stage crew are union, I need to negotiate all the labor contracts. And typically when they're negotiated for several years, but within each contract there is grievance procedures, so occasionally when we don't agree on something, we have to meet and negotiate and talk about it. So labor relations is a big part of my job. Any surprise? And of course we have concerts every week, 3 nights a week, 2 nights a week. I have donors to entertain and nurture, so sometimes it's 3, 4 evenings a week. It's 6 days a week, it's several hours a day, and it's varied. So it's a very fun job. You get to meet a lot of people, and most importantly, you get to work with one of the finest orchestras in the US. It's really a really remarkable group of musicians. And we get to work with local artists and artists from around the world that are the best in what they do. So to have the privilege of meeting, fine pianists or singers or violinists and hear them play, even after a long day when I'm sitting at Powell Hall and I'm listening to a concert, the joy and just the emotion that comes from listening to some of the best music is really unique. So show of hands, tell me who has been to Powell Hall to hear the orchestra? That's pretty good. Good. Great. So who was raised in St. Louis and came to the orchestra as a student, young student? Almost all of you. That's amazing. I meet people who are well into their 90s, who remember coming to the symphony like 80 years ago at Kiel Auditorium on Market. Just do the math. That was a long time ago, and I find that fascinating. We're the second oldest in the country, 142 years old. And we do a lot of stuff, and I'll talk to you a little bit about that. So let me ask you, so what is leadership? When I was younger, people gave me lessons on leadership, and I would roll my eyes. What is leadership? What do you think it is? What are the elements of leadership? Anything? Any idea? Yeah?
I think it's empathy, active listening.
Yeah. Empathy,
Vision.
listening, yeah. Absolutely. Anything else that comes to mind? What does it take? What does leadership?
Going after things.
Going after things, yeah. Ambition, but like action, ambition, decision making, yeah. Anything else? Yeah? Yeah, being able to direct people, absolutely. All good, all great answers. And you probably saw the difference between being a manager and a leader, right? So managing, you're just helping implement, and leading is really about setting the vision, inspiring, motivating. And so a leader creates vision and goals, influence others to share the vision and work towards the goal, process of providing direction, as you did say, energizing others, obtaining their voluntary commitment to the leader's vision, ability to influence towards a goal. It took me a really long time to understand that and to find the right level of investment in a team so that you really get them to march to your own rhythm, or to really do the things. And in leadership, and it's true of any job you'll have, there's a point at which you have to learn to let go, to let people do it their way. And that's really hard, and it's a fine line, and that's the difference sometimes, and I see it on my team. The people who are natural leaders have the ability to inspire others, to tell them exactly what they hope to see, and then let them do the work. Understanding what their expectations are, but just let them go. And I had this conversation with Stéphane Deneuve recently, the music director. He was conducting a very challenging piece. And after the rehearsal, he walked off stage, and I was just standing there. And he came to me, and he was very upset about himself. I said, "Why are you upset?" He said, "I'm trying to control too much. I'm not letting them play. I'm just trying to control how they play it. And I need to let go." And sometimes when magic happens is when you really let go. I have not raised children, so I can't speak of that. So many of you have. But it's like what is the balance between providing clarity? You have to over-communicate. You have to be very clear with expectations. If you are someone who lives well with uncertainty and change and risk, you'll realize that there are people who don't live well with the vagueness. You have to be super specific, super clear, and yet you need to let them do the work. Rewarding people, supporting them, having empathy, as you said, it's critical. Oftentimes, 80% of my time during a day will not to be directing people what to do, will be to listen to them, as you said, will be to show empathy, to inquire about themselves. How are you doing? How's your dog? How's your husband? Just to get them to feel at ease with me, so when there's a crisis, they know that I'm going to listen and they can trust me or come to me when there's a problem. And if they fail, or if there's a mistake, then they know they can come to me and say, "I'm sorry, I made this mistake," and it's fine, we fix it, we move on. My job is to really support their work and make sure that when there are mistakes, this is something that we can fix together. Sometimes, let me just look at time. Sometimes people are really preoccupied by making failure. And for me, there's no failure per se. For me, it's life goes on, and we learn from mistakes, but there's nothing. I always tell my team, we're not brain surgeons. What we do is very important. But at the end of the day, if you make a mistake, you'll learn from it. But I have virtually never seen a problem that we couldn't fix, even if it was really, really bad. Like there's a concert and programs are not delivered, or there's a typo in a program, or there's something, I mean, really, there is nothing that could possibly happen that would be so serious that someone can't recover from it. So in leadership over the years, and it's coming from my own experience, but also watching my mentors or watching other people. And sometimes you find out about leadership qualities by seeing what doesn't work and what's broken. And it's true of my team. We learn a lot together when we realize that we are not going in the right direction or not taking the right approach. But we talked about that, the communication piece, the motivation, the feedback, very important. Creativity. A leader needs to be able to come up with the ideas and also inspire others to unleash their creativity. I think also, someone said courage, I think it was you, Mackenzie, courage or just going ahead or just, it takes courage. You know, sometimes I get up in the morning and I'm thinking, ugh, we have to deal with this. What if I come to work with looking discouraged and uninspired, or that, then it's going to reflect on others. Others will sense that my heart is not in it. So sometimes you have to fake it, but it works. Building a strong work ethic is really, really important. So us at the Symphony, among ourselves internally, we agree to a code of conduct, but we agree to values and we commit to certain things we'll do together. And they know that I can hold them accountable for it, they can hold me accountable, and it's done in a very friendly manner, but we are making commitments together every year, and every year we question the commitments we make. And be accountable is simple. I'll tell you, I'll do this or that, I'll do my job, you do yours, and then together we can be really successful. And it's amazing the amount of conflict within an organization that arises because colleagues drop the ball and are not being accountable to others. So the spirit of that is really, really, really important. So again, the qualities I have found in leaders, and this is something for those of you who are in high school and still in school and as you enter college, any job you take, no matter what your position is, those are qualities that I think you'll value over time. And they are very, very important, and they are very important to nurture from a young age. And I'll share a few with you, and one is the appetite for learning and having an inquisitive mind is something that will always serve you. And I encourage you, all of you, but especially if you are in high school and thinking about college and your future, there's always going to be time for work and time for responsibilities, but learning and keeping an open mind and being inquisitive, learn now, because as you get older it gets harder because you don't have the same energy, but also because you have the time, whether it's learning a language or traveling or reading or discovering new hobbies. Always make sure that that's part of taking care of yourself. Emotional intelligence becomes very, very important when you enter the job market. To be able to be awareness of how your own emotions are at play. If you're in school, you probably experience a situation with colleagues or peers where your own emotions lead you the wrong way. You make assumptions about people's actions, you make assumptions about people's intention. Being aware is just to also question and keep an inquisitive mind when you interact with others. This hurt me, why did you do this to me? You won't believe in the work environment how pressing this behavior becomes to really foster really positive and good relationships with colleagues. Active listening, we talked about listening earlier and knowing how to leverage your empathy and listening, courage and humility, creativity, vulnerability, we'll talk about this a little more, but knowing that it's okay to ask for help. Asking for help doesn't mean failure, and actually people love to be asked for advice. They love it. Whether it's the Jeff Bezos, trust me, Jeff Bezos, I'm sure loves to be asked for advice. So people who have big responsibilities and big jobs love to ask for advice, to be asked for advice. I'm sure your parents love to be asked for advice. Any adult, anyone who's more experienced would love for you to come and say, what would you do if you were in my situation? And empower others in team spirit. Again, whether you play a sport, or whether you're in school and doing a project with a peer, or later in life when you work in a business, really empower others in team spirit. It's like just really supporting the teamwork and not put yourself ahead of others. So let me stop here. Any questions or reflections about leadership or things that seemed strange to you or anything that, yeah?
I'm just curious, in your, education, whatever program, if you did an arts management program, I think you mentioned.
Yeah, I do.
Did you find that these types of relationship building skills were very present in the educational program, or did you have other experiences that helped you build those skills?
Yeah, it's mostly other experience and work experiences that help me build skills, and it's an evolution. So I remember when I did my master's in arts, there were lots of classes, so the theory was very good. The practice, it's really hard. First of all, my teachers were not people who had ran arts organizations, or they were faculty teachers teaching nonprofit management or teaching budgeting or finance or things. I remember one class, organizational behavior, and we were laughing at that class like there's no tomorrow. We thought it was a waste of time. Ha, 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 ha. Well, fast forward 20 years later, I thought, my gosh, I should have listened. Because 80% of what I do now is anchored in our organizational behavior. That said, it's over time the practice of managing and having a team, and you learn a lot. I will never forget the first day I had the job as a CEO. I went to bed and I opened my eyes and I thought, oh my gosh, now I'm responsible for people's payroll. It's my responsibility to ensure these people get paid every day and let them sleep. I was all awake in bed thinking, oh my gosh, there's 50 into the small organization. There are 15 people who depend on me for the success of this organization, because at the end of the day, if we raise enough money or we sell enough tickets and we have enough cash in the bank, I can pay their salary. And that's something I never thought about until that day. And it was serious responsibility. Suddenly you say, wait a minute, it's not just me, it's the whole team. But it's mostly something I learned over the years. And even today, I have a coach, we talk often about leadership, I've read a lot of things that have helped me, and it's really an evolution. We're human beings, so you can't, I don't know a perfect CEO, and there's people in the industry at large who are remarkable thinkers and people who have seen extraordinary success because they have the quality of understanding people, being really inspirational, and having tremendous empathy. Like, really tremendous. And that's hard. Because sometimes at the end of the week, you're tired of taking care of other people's problems, and then you go home, and then there's more problems at home. So it's a balancing act, and that's why the concept of taking care of yourself and balancing, and it's true, whether you're in school or later, as a parent, I'm sure you all struggle with balancing things, but it speaks also of leadership. It takes tremendous energy and emotional capacity to lead a team. And in the pandemic, I think this morning I was giving a talk to a group of leaders, and we were reflecting on the number one leadership learning or qualities we have found in common in this crisis is the fact that we found out that being vulnerable was probably the number one quality, is realizing that this was a global crisis none of us controlled. There was nothing you could do about the impact of COVID in our lives and environment, other than being careful about your own health. And then suddenly it triggered a tremendous creativity for me at the symphony to tell my team, stop focusing on things you can control, because you're going to drive yourself crazy. Let's focus on things we can create. How can we think outside the box and shed all the old and the stuff we've done that we can't do now because there's a pandemic, and let's create new things. And it was amazing what we did. We did too much, but it was really amazing. Any other questions about leadership or observation? And by the way, for those of you who teach, the principles are no different. It's the same. You have a class of students and you have to get through a curriculum, and it's very, very, very similar. So what I wish I knew at 16, I was fairly shy, and I was a gifted young woman, so I could dabble into anything, whether it was academia or music, or so teachers left me alone, and they liked me, and I had good friends, and But I was really not really wired to ask for help or to go to people, because I was probably raised with the belief that you need to know what you're doing. Like, never was I told, it's okay not to know, don't worry about it. You have to have the knowledge. You have to know your path and the way you're ahead. And today, given all the pressures that young people have as they prepare to go to college or even later in life, it's like the idea that you don't know about your life. There's no way, you don't know what's ahead for you. And life has wonderful things in store for you. And it's okay to get on a wagon or the train, and it's okay to get off the train. There's no mistake in pursuing a path, and at some point you say, this is not my path. There's something else. I had a fabulous career as a tax attorney for 7 years, which still serves me today. I'm excellent at numbers. I can read any balance sheet. I'm not afraid of P&Ls. I can have very serious conversations with a bunch of investment specialists about our retirement. I do legal work. Nothing scares me when it comes to legal drafting a contract or negotiation. But I had that training. And it's other things I developed over the years after that. So I always say it's okay not to know what's ahead, and it's okay not to know. You're supposed to go to college, you want to go to college, you don't know where to go, and that's fine. You can just explore and ask people for advice. To take care of yourself and know yourself, that's true of any one of us, and knowing yourself is something that will change and develop over the years. Nurture friendships, but walk away from toxic relationships. Sometimes it takes time, but there's no problem saying no. And for us, and I don't want to generalize, but for us women, oftentimes it's hard to say no or walk away from situations. I know I have a savior mentality, and maybe it came from my Catholic education. Don't know. But I do have a savior mentality, so I need to teach myself to say no, can't do this, won't do it. We talked about this, learning new skills, traveling, read, write, be curious about life. Writing is an extraordinary exercise. Even if you don't like to write, I encourage you to write down, even if it's once a month. It's amazing what you discover about yourself. And if there's one skill set that I find is weak in our society today, whether I hire a 22-year-old or I hire a 50-year-old, is very few members of my team are good writers. So, young ladies, if you want to develop a skill set, learn to write. That's going to serve you forever. And your future bosses will thank me for reminding you to really practice your writing. Very important. Very, very, very essential. And the communication and something like this, and all of these, and I'm happy to send this to you later. But as you think of college, or as you think of work or employment opportunities, remember that you can reach out to anyone for advice. I do not know, I have not experienced someone in the leadership position turning down an opportunity to meet with someone who's asking for help. My advice is be clear about what you want. Keep it short. You know, busy people are busy. Be very, very clear. Be succinct. Be prepared. Come with an agenda. Send an agenda in advance. Show up prepared. Show up looking professional. And very importantly, listen. And after the meeting has happened, say thank you. You will not believe the number of people who interview with me or come to me, and I never get a thank you after the fact. It makes a world of difference. And practicing the art of writing thank you notes will set you apart. And I say this very seriously. I have raised millions of dollars because I nurtured the art of saying thank you and following up and really inquiring. And remember that whenever you exchange or connect with people, if you meet Mr. or Mrs. so-and-so tomorrow, CEO of whatever company, you seek advice, they meet with you, you move on. Periodically, and I don't say once a month, maybe it's once a year, maybe it's twice a year, drop them a note. So-and-so, it was great to meet you. I followed your advice and now I'm doing this, now I'm doing an internship, or I'm starting college next month. You never know, 20 years from now, something's gonna come up. You're gonna apply for a job, and that Mr. Smith is the CEO, is someone in the executive team of that company. And you will have stayed in touch over the years, even if it's once every 5 years. that person will never forget you. And then they'll say, hey, mister, remember we met in 1994, and I'm applying for this job. You have no idea, you never know. Never know in your life and career who you might run into, or opportunities that might be presented to you. And then because you have nurtured the relationship years later, you say, wow, who knew? You never know. Very, very small world. Practice mindfulness and thoughtfulness. Again, we don't always have to agree, whether you're in at work, at school, but the thoughtfulness. Our society has entered a very strange phase just before the pandemic, during the pandemic, and after. And life is hard, and we're all over-committed, busy. Just practice the thoughtfulness of just being kind to others and give a break to one another. Oftentimes on my team, when there are conflicts, I say, just give yourself a break. Nothing's going to happen overnight. Or this conflict is not very serious, not so serious. And then when you step away from it, stay away from email. When you get upset is the #1 rule. But oftentimes little crises pass, and people will say, I was upset for no reason. So let's see, I think that was it. Career in the arts, and I know you were thinking about this, right? So I always say, if you want to work in management, whether it's arts or other industries, I always joke and say, go get a psychology degree, because you'll deal with more HR than any other issues. Obviously, you need to know about the art form itself. So most of us who work at the symphony, not all of us, but most of us have either a very advanced background in music, or we came from the arts fields. Some don't, and you can learn, so that's not a problem. But over the years, if you want to aspire to take the position as a CEO, then I think the artistic background will be very, very essential. I've always believed that you don't need an MBA or a master's in arts administration, but what you need to know about managing people, you need to know about finances. So if you don't like numbers now, you might want to start working on being better at understanding financial statements, budgeting. Don't be afraid by numbers. Some of my employees struggle with that, and there's always training. It's a lot easier to train someone on budgeting than it is to make them good writers. So, just telling you, it's a lot easier. So there's no right or wrong. I've hired people with MBAs and arts management degrees. I've hired people who came to me after raising a family after 20 years and just having good, sound judgment and good work experience. The passion is important, and the entrepreneurial spirit is important. Nonprofit management is hard. Oftentimes, whether it's a social agency or arts organization, hours are long, and you have to be really passionate about the mission. So as you think of college, if you want to pursue a career, I mean, there's lots of institutions now that offer very, very good arts management program, and that could be just fine, but I always tell students, if you're going to get a degree in college, an undergrad in arts management or a discipline similar to that, make sure you get internships. Make sure you get the practice. I have hired students, recent graduate with very little experience, but they had internships during the summers in between every single of their years, and that makes a difference because they learn. That's the way you're going to learn, is to be on the ground with other professionals and learn about the job. And then project management is key. Most of what we do is project management, so learn about good organizational skills and planning is really long. But networking is the best way to get into the field. When you're non-experienced and wanting to enter the field, is networking with people who are in the field. If you're in St. Louis, there's tons of arts organizations and a lot of great colleagues who are able and willing to give advice. And later on, continue to network, stay in touch with colleagues. Even after you move on, just stay in touch with former bosses and mentors. That's going to really help you. So essentially, there's not one way to get into arts management, and it's true of virtually most disciplines. However, when you get into certain types of arts organizations, especially museum, dance to a certain degree. Sometimes after a while it's hard to jump from one discipline to another if you do not have the artistic background. But it's not essential, but it might be a little difficult. If tomorrow I'm hiring for a production manager and the person comes with 15 years of museum experience as a curator, well, it's probably not going to work because they come from a very different environment. So any questions about that? Okay. And I think that was it. Yeah. Voila. So I can take questions also about the symphony. Oh, no, I can take questions about also the orchestra, the symphony itself, how we program, and so on and so forth. Any questions about this? Yes?
I just had an observation that as young women entering the workforce, all of the qualities that you described you would want to aspire to as a leader are also great qualities to have at your employer. Like, if you're entering a job, to have a boss that understands all of the things that you said will really help you grow.
Yes.
And so, I don't know, are there questions you can ask to try to learn a little bit more about that before you get into a job, or how do you evaluate if you're at the right place?
Yeah, and depending on what level of the organization, and I just got this question yesterday. I was interviewing an executive for a position in the philanthropy department at a pretty high level. So the person probably has by now close to 15, 20 years of experience. And she had a great question. She asked me about my vision. She asked me about my values. She asked me what drives me crazy about my team. Like, how picky are you and what drives you? What do they do that drives you crazy? So she was trying to see my style, and we just had a conversation. So I think oftentimes people are afraid to ask people in authority about, but I think trying to establish a dialogue and a conversation to see, and sometimes it's asking, when you manage employees, what are your expectations? Or, what are situations where you were very frustrated? And it's going to tell a lot about their personalities. And sometimes the middle management, or, my job is to make sure that my directors, my VPs, my directors, and middle management are truly embracing my philosophy as a leader. And I'm not there to witness everything, right? So occasionally I'm going to hear of problems or things, I'm going to say, why is that? And beyond the personal conflict, sometimes there are people who are not so experienced managing other people, and we lose people because they don't know how to manage teams. So our job is to ensure we give them the training they need. And it's hard. It's really, really hard. But again, asking questions and if a prospective employer has issues or is bothered by the questions of that nature, that's a sign. And say, gee, if they don't like, because the employer is also putting their best out there to hire the best employees. If they're not welcoming, if they don't have an inquisitive mind and they are not welcoming questions, or if they are defensive, that's usually a bad sign. Yes?
I was just wondering, I really appreciate all that you shared. It's very, very helpful, I think, for the students and for all of us here, how you describe leadership.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, we're still in a pandemic, but the money side of that, being in a nonprofit organization, trying to figure out, it probably was a very different job, pre and post-pandemic, and I think we could talk about that a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely.
What were your first steps, to try to figure out what to do, next?
That's a great question. So yes, so as a nonprofit organization, because 2/3 of our budget comes from fundraising, so the money people give every year, and the other third is ticket revenue. So that piece was gone. So the first thing we did is really look at expenses. It's as basic as that. So first of all, canceling concert, it's going to sound crazy, but there's a law of diminishing return, right? We did not lose money by canceling concerts because our expenses suddenly went down. Imagine I saved $1.2 million in advertising alone. because I was canceling 59 concerts or more, I mean over time, because we pulled everything we could pull, cancel overnight, we did. I canceled the gifts, the advertising, I canceled, and then we took salary reduction. So in the end, I think last year, well, the first year of the pandemic, altogether, I think I cut 10 million of the 30 because I knew that we were going to have a gap of 10 million. So that was the first step because that's easy. And my approach as a leader is I never, when there's money issues, the cutting expenses is never necessarily my first move. Because sometimes we cut, and I'll give an example, music in the schools or arts in the schools. If we keep cutting constantly, we're never going to nurture a love for the arts and train students to really be creative. And so why cut there? It's crazy. It's a cut in investment into the future. So I'm always very careful that when there are money issues, it doesn't mean that there's an expense problem. It could be that we don't generate enough revenue. And we need to think about how can we create that will help us generate more revenue. So the second thing, so first thing is we cut expenses. The second thing we did is we had to stay connected to the community. And so if you think of the circles of engagements at the symphony, the first circle of engagement is the SLSO family. The orchestra, the 2 choruses, the youth orchestra, my board, staff, everybody. And then second layer, the donors who give us a lot of money every year. And the third layer, the audience, and so on and so forth. So we look at the circle of engagements and develop a communication plan and said, we're going to stay in touch with all of these constituents and make sure that they know what we're doing, that we're thinking of them, and that we're creating programs to keep them engaged. So people in the industry were freaked out by the fact that we could not have live gathering, like gathering of live music. But I thought, let's not focus on this. This is not about live performances. This is about being engaged and connected. There are many ways in life to be connected. And live music is really unique. And today, now that we are back and people are coming back, we realize how much we missed it. But there's so many different ways to connect. So we developed a lot of programming online, from the basic Zoom lecture about the behind the scenes of the orchestra, like teaching, a lot of education learning of adults and also children. So the first constituents we served initially were the teachers and the parents. Because all of you were suddenly stuck overnight at home with children or young adults not knowing what to do. And suddenly families were getting the pressure of trying to figure out, plus losing their jobs, plus having a new way of running. So we developed a platform to provide resources overnight to those teachers and parents. And we already had a lot of online curriculum ready. So we repackaged everything and started communicating like crazy. We did a workshop at some point for teachers, because that's what we do a lot now, is we train teachers. We give them the curriculum in hand, train them, and they're music teachers, so they turn around and then teach in their schools, because we cannot be in every single school. Now we're expanding to make sure that non-music teachers incorporate music in their curriculum. So that's a long-term strategy. But so we did that. It was amazing because initially my team, of course, didn't know what to do. And the fourth or fifth thing we did is I reached out to WashU, the infectious disease specialist, and I called, and it was Dr. Abby Carlson. She went to Atlanta soon. Now it's Dr. Leanne. And I called them and I said, I need advice. Help me. And they came. They did a study of the hall, a study of air filters, airflow. They helped me develop. I had a team of 4 of my executives who developed COVID protocols. It's like 25-page long, crazy. Because we had to be able, and then I sent the team home on March 23. Then I equipped everybody with a laptop. We were on the way to do an IT kind of restructuring, so we were probably 70% of the way there. So in a matter of a week, everyone had a laptop, was connected from home, and we learned. And the thing I did is every week I was touching base with the full staff, which is unusual. I don't do weekly meetings because there's not enough time. And it was 30 minutes, really high level, and the only thing I did for 6 months is saying online every morning, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine, you're going to be fine. And it was our little 30 minutes together, and the staff talked to me about their anxiety, and we talked about taking care of ourselves and just moving forward, and little by little, things started making sense. And then I had to negotiate with the orchestra for salary reduction, and so on and so forth. So there were several things, but also we talked to donors a lot. And the strange thing is people were at home. So it was easy to call people and reach. So we've had more donor conversation in the last year than ever before, because people were home just waiting. So it created a sense of connection that was pretty strong. So fast forward, I don't know how many, I think we did like some crazy, like 150 concerts and online events, and then we took the orchestra outdoors in small chamber formation. And for about a month and a half in the fall and 3 months in the spring, we actually did live performances on stage at Powell Hall with reduced audiences. That was a lot of work, and you know, we made no money. I mean, it was not for the purpose of generating a lot of revenue. So in the end, that's how we managed, learned a lot from it. But today, it's the intensity of what we're doing, it's just too much. So I'm starting to talk to the team about the art of slowing down. You know, there was a benefit to the pandemic at some point where all of us put a lot of things on hold. And it was not a bad thing. So now that we're back, I think there's a lot of activities, lots of concerts. And sales have been doing okay. People are back, and we did a vaccination policy and so on and so forth. So I gathered about 20 performing arts organizations in August, and we all made a joint announcement about vaccination. Everybody was very scared, and I took the lead because several colleagues reached out to me and said, if the symphony goes ahead first, we'll follow. So that's what I did, because we had no choice. I mean, we had to move ahead with some measures, and I would say probably 80% of our audience today came back because there was this new policy. So, and the list is long, right? There's many other things we did. So it was the money, the people, the artistic content, and keeping the team safe and confident. And when my team surveyed last year, we had the highest rate of approval, because they recognized that we had been there for them. So the motto all year is, the symphony was there for me. Whether you were a staff member, audience member, the musician on stage, or someone in the community. And no one was prepared for this. I mean, this is, talk about a test of leadership, this was probably the most unusual situation any one of us was given to experience. And it's not done, right? We're still grappling with a lot of the aftermath. And I don't know what the audience of the future is going to be like, and I don't know where this is going to lead. We're exploring and changing things. I still believe that we have a lot of programming to offer, which is great, but the demands on our budget are great too. Having an orchestra of that size, it's big on the budget, and you need to keep them busy. So that's the infrastructure of our business that's in a way flawed, and I don't say this in a negative way, is that it's a very heavy salary structure that's a very, very high portion of the budget. Any other questions? Yeah?
Kind of following up on that, something earlier you mentioned that you would sign off on artistic decisions regarding season or I assume with a doctor. In a normal time, I realize the pandemic has created this situation, unprecedented, but is there ever a situation where you have to say, no, we're not going to program that because our budget won't allow for it. That's a gigantic mauler, 60 of 1,000. We can't pay all those people. Maybe we should consider a smaller work or something like that. How do you go back and forth to agree upon these sorts of issues?
It happens all the time. So we happen to have a good relationship, but also he's very, so Stefan, the music director, is very mindful and aware. So he's very savvy when it comes to budgets and demands and so on and so forth. So what we do is we always take a very big approach, and I know that there's a few projects that he wants to do that are really dear to him. So what I do is I'll say we can do 2 large projects and the rest we have to, and sometimes it's the approach to marketing and how we sell projects and do we have the resources to support. So I'll give you an example. And that's a question for anyone in this audience. Let's say I program Beethoven 5. And the season is September to June. Well, and we typically announce a season in February or March of the season that precedes, right? So let's say it's March 21. I'm announcing the season September 21 through June 22. And Beethoven 5 is programmed in September. So he wants to do Beethoven 5. And I'll say, well, would you program Beethoven 5 in September, or would you program it in March, or in May, or later? So there's several things that we think about. It's not a super complex work, right? So in September, the orchestra comes back after a 2-month break. So if we do something that's artistically very taxing or complicated, I always encourage my music director to do it later. The orchestra is super high level, they come back, they play, and yet the quality of the playing continues to improve over the season because they have more time on stage together, and after 2 months, you know, they're rested, normal. The longer time I have, that's a basic math, the longer time I have to sell tickets for a popular program, the more money I'm going to make. So why would I put Beethoven 5 in September when most of you are scrambling, getting kids back to school, and getting back to your fall routine, and getting out of summer, and do you want to go to the symphony? Probably not. But comes October and November, you go, oh, let's go to the symphony, you know, it's nice fall night, date night, let's go to the symphony. And then if I put it in the spring, then I have all fall to promote and raise the excitement and the hype about Beethoven 5. So for example, we put Harry Potter in April of 22 this year because I thought that's going to sell a lot of tickets, and we're doing 3 or 4, and I'm giving the institution the opportunity to have the benefit of time to sell more tickets and create more awareness. So Stefan and I have conversations like this all the time. And I tend to, and my team is very strong on budget, and my artistic team is very strong on budgeting, so they know exactly, and they do trade-offs all the time that he's not even aware of. For example, if I present 8 pianists a year, I don't present the top 8 pianists, and top, I mean, top in celebrity and fee. Like Fima Bronfman was here last week. Bronfman's fee is probably the highest in the country. So I'm not gonna have 8 pianists who command the highest fee because I'm gonna go bankrupt, right? So then we have 8, so we're gonna say, okay, we're gonna hire 3 emerging, fee is lower, 3 middle career, and maybe 2 that are top. So we have these conversations all the time, and same with productions, you know, how many choral or operatic productions do we do, all the extras, and also the orchestra is the same thing, is occasionally, and very often actually, is going to make choices about forces that will reduce the budget for a production. And I'll give you an example. A full string complement would be 16, 14, 12, 10, 8. 16 first violins, 14 second violins, 12 violas, 10 cello, 8 basses. That's the full orchestra complement. If we do a Mahler symphony, that's the complement we're going to go to. But if we do a Haydn symphony or Beethoven symphony, you can do much reduced strings. If you do a Mozart piano concerto, you can do. I have players who are off every week. I always have musicians, not every week, but most weeks. Someone is rotated off or someone is just on vacation. So I'm not going to hire a violinist to replace someone in the orchestra who's off that week unless it's absolutely necessary. So if I do a Mahler First Symphony, no one in the orchestra is allowed to take off because I don't want to have to spend money to hire outside of the orchestra, which occasionally I have to do, especially in the winds and brass section, because someone has to be on vacation or someone is off, or someone is injured, or someone is sick. It happens. If I have a section of 6 horns, someone has the flu or has a cold, misses 1 or 2 services, then usually I need to hire someone, and we have a list of players that we call to come and replace. So it's a constant adjustment, and my team keeps a very close eye on it, and then Stefan and I talk about, but we don't have to talk about money a lot, because naturally he knows, and my team does a very good job of managing the budget. And occasionally, if he wants to be unreasonable in a good way, then he and I have conversations, and it's a trade-off. You know, I'm going to give you this, then give me that, or rethink this or postpone that. And you know, music directors, they love to lead big orchestras and have big grandiose projects, but you don't want that every weekend. So naturally, there are programs that are attracting more people and more popular, and there are in-between programs that are not as, you know, for which the demand is not as high. Any other questions? Yeah?
What can you share with folks in terms of the art of negotiation?
Yeah.
So, you know, I think one of the most difficult things for women to do is to ask for whatever that ask is, whether it's time, money, you know, promotion. Yeah. What can you share?
So I will always say know your worth, and what I mean by that is don't be shy of, so what I typically do for myself, but for others, is list my qualities and what I bring to the organization that's unique to me. I usually stay away from comparing myself to others, because you know, sometimes you don't know, but I say, you hired me to do this job, this is what I bring to the job, and if you've been there for a while and you're due, you think that you're due for an increase, here's what I've achieved since, and here's, and maybe you get a few colleagues in the organization to speak of the value and the quality that you bring. That's number one, and to be very confident about that. There's nothing wrong about asking for money, and you're right, oftentimes women, we are, and I'm the first. I negotiated my contract recently, and my board chair said, oh my gosh, you're so easy, and I thought, oh, should I? Definitely. But you know, it's okay, it's a quality. The second thing is do your research. And there's tons of resources online, and you could also consult with people who do this for a living. Do your research. Is that if you hold a job somewhere for that kind of position, try to find out on average what's the pay for that job in St. Louis, but in other markets. I don't know where you work, but you know, in general, what is the average? And whether you're in the private sector and you negotiate with a manager, or whether you're part of a union, it's the same rule. So do your research. The third piece is, I always put the salary increase in the context of what I bring to the company, but also opportunities for growth, right? So salary is one thing, but maybe there's other things that would make a difference to you that's not necessarily increase in salary. It could be a bonus, it could be training, it could be reimbursement of expenses, it could be having more help in your department, it could be many, many things. So think creatively about, and then sometimes when employers are not able to approve salary X on a day you ask because they have budgets and they can't increase, is to do an increase by stages. I often do that when I hire people. Let's say the salary pays 50, and they just left a job that paid them 60. I said, well, the job is 50, but listen, I'm going to pay you 55 in 12 months, and then we can look at an increase over time. So sometimes that's a way to get where you want to do, where you want to be just over time by negotiating, because the real cost to the employer will be minimal. And same, you know, whether health benefit, time off. Time off can be a huge compensation element and benefit. Right now, I have too much time off. I realize I'd love to take it, but every year I realize I can't take my time off, but it's a value, and it's my own sanity and rest, and so this year I'm trying to take it. So there's a whole list of things, and you know, you have to be prepared and brave and develop, and there's a book about this, The Art of Negotiation, that I read years ago, that how do you dodge the behavior or the questions or the interaction with a supervisor that undermines your request. And that's hard. I mean, you just got to be prepared. So, and again, it's research and knowing who the other elements of the company are, and are you going to deflect the questions of, well, we don't have money. Well, you know, I bring this and that to the company. Or, it's retention. It's extremely costly to hire new employees, train them, and you're going to always be cheaper to the company for staying where you are. And so say that. Say, your investment in me is going to pay off, and it's going to cost you much less to keep me at higher salary than see me leave if you're willing to leave and replace my position. Because that's a fact. And if they appreciate you, they will find a way. Every time, even when I don't have money, I find a way. So we need to say very clearly, is it title the issue, is it salary, what are the various elements? And one meeting is, unless they say, yes, we'll give you what you ask, have them sit on it. And maybe talk to HR or just talk to someone else and just let it, you know. Sometimes someone will come to me 3 times and there's nothing wrong with that. It allows me to think. And I've changed my mind often. When people put pressure and say, you've got to do this, you're going to lose this person, and we're going to say, well, we don't have money, and then you just think about it. And you just think about what people say, and then you come back and say, you know. So take your time. And being kind and being professional and respectful, very important. Like, and also praising, if you report to someone who has decision-making authorities over your salary, in a genuine way to praise how much you enjoy working with them and just make them feel at ease first. And because people don't like to talk about money. Most of us hate to talk about money. This is not uncommon. Does that help? Yeah. Anything else? Almost. Any other questions? Good. If not, I will invite you. I left brochures in the front, and please, I hope you get to come to hear the orchestra. We have a ton of programming, as I said, classical, movies, pops, and we have tickets now at $15 or less, so there's really always very affordable tickets for concerts. And again, mask wearing is mandated, and it's a very safe environment, so I hope you come. So thank you for having me. Have a good evening.
It'd be really nice just to have your feedback so we can make these events even better. And I hope you have a great night. Thank you.
Yeah, can you